Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Flamehead97 here for your year-endless video for top 15 albums of 2022. This will be the final video of 2022. Now this list was a little more complicated to come up with, if I'm being very honest with you guys, because unlike previous years when I've done year-endless videos like this, I listened to everything that I could. But throughout this year in 2022, I took my time listening to these albums because I just wasn't really having much passion or anything like that to sit down and listen to too many albums all at once. So this list was a little more complicated to come up with, but I got 15 albums here for you. So let's go and get started. Kicking off in at number 15 is Planet Zero by Shinedown. Now, I know this is making the top 15 albums of the year video, but it's easily my least favorite album on this list because this album, it just doesn't really do much for me. I mean, that probably doesn't make any sense having it on this list because I'm saying it doesn't do much for me, but I listened to this album in full and I just didn't like it very much. I mean, Daylight was a good song, and maybe a couple other songs were decent, but this album overall, it's just not very good. I was let down by it, but I don't think it's a bad album. I just think they could have done better because a lot of these songs just don't do it for me, and that's a shame to say because I've been a fan of this band since 2008. So yeah, this is easily my least favorite Shinedown album. Attention Attention wasn't their best album either, but I would take that album over Planet Zero. Just saying. So 15 is Planet Zero by Shinedown. It's a shame to say this because this band is very talented. Number 14 is King's Disease 3 by rapper Nas. Of course, Nas is a legend in rap/hip-hop music. And his album King's Disease 3, I thought it was a pretty good album. I mean, I don't think it's any of his best effort or anything, but I did like this album. I thought it was a really good album, so I'll definitely be coming back to it when I can. I mean, there were like maybe a few songs on this album that seemed a little bit too mainstream for my preference when it comes to Nas, because in his older music he wasn't really trying to take the flow of these whack artists of today and try to put it in his take of music, because Nas is too good for that. Whoever came up with that idea and told Nas to try to be a little mainstream in some of these songs, it's just ridiculous because Nas is too good to try to attempt to be a modern trap artist or any of this other generic shit that you have in hip-hop these days. But I'm not denying this album because it was a good album. There were just a few songs that I would probably skip. But other than that, though, it was a good album by Nas. So, number 13 is Boombox by Fozzy. This was one of my most anticipated albums of 2022. Meanwhile, while I think Judas, their previous album, is better, I still like Boombox. I think it's a really good album. I Still Run was a good song. I really like that one a lot. It actually became my favorite song of the album for over time. But yeah, Boombox is a really good album. I mean, I don't think it's one of Fozzy's best or anything, but I still like the album though a lot because it's a very good album. Fozzy is just definitely a band that deserves more love and attention from rock/metal fans. They're just a really great band. Boombox was a really good album. I know it's kind of low in the list, but there is better albums this year in my opinion. But, however, Boombox was definitely a good album, and an album that is definitely worth checking out. So, I Still Burn was a good one. Another good song is Nowhere to Run, which was the lead single that we got back in 2019. So about 3 years before that one came out. or close to 3 years for the album's release. So, yeah, there's definitely lots of great things I could say about this album. But that's all I'll say, though, because I got other albums to look forward to in this list. So, number 13 is Boombox by Fozzy. Check this album out. Number 12 is Patient Number 9 by Ozzy Osbourne. Of course, everyone should know who Ozzy is, even if you're not into rock and metal music, because he's a legend. He's best known for being the original lead vocalist of legendary heavy metal band Black Sabbath, but throughout the years, Ozzy has been known to also make solo albums outside of Black Sabbath, and Patient Number 9 was definitely a good album. I thought it was better than his last album, Ordinary Man, which I believe he released in 2020. So Patient Number 9 was definitely a huge improvement over Ordinary Man, because Ordinary Man, it just felt like it was too mainstream. At least with this album, he got to work with the likes of Zakk Wylde and some other legends when it comes to metal rock music. So yeah, this was definitely a great return for Ozzy when it comes to his solo material, because this album was just great. I wish I would have put it higher, but however, I still think it's a very good album by Ozzy Osbourne. I meant my bad on that. But yeah, Patient Number 9 is definitely a great album by Ozzy Osbourne. I would definitely say it's probably his best, probably since like the late 90s or early 2000s at this point. So, Patient Number 9, definitely a very good album from Ozzy. Number 11 is The Hell We Create by Christian metalcore band Fit for a King. Now, I don't really listen to Fit for a King all that much, because metalcore isn't really my cup of tea anymore like it was over 2 years ago, but I'll still listen to it every once in a while. So The Hell We Create, definitely worthy of being on here. It was a good album. I mean, there may have been like some radio-friendly songs that only had like clean vocals on some of these songs, but they've been doing that for like the last album or so. So it's nothing really new, but still a good album. Reaper was definitely a banger. I really like Reaper. It may be my favorite on the album. So yeah, this album, I think it was a solid album for what it was. I mean, it could have been better, because like I'm saying, it did have some radio-friendly moments, which doesn't really do much for me when it comes to metalcore. That's always been a problem I've had with the metalcore genre, when bands try to sell out. I mean, it's okay if bands want to make ballads, but at least have some unclean vocals in there. Because if you're just having clean vocals in your metalcore band, then I'm just going to turn off the music. But there's heavy songs on this album, but there's also your lighter moments, which is slightly a complaint for me, which is why this album is near the bottom of the list, but I still think it's a good album for what it was. So number 11, The Hell We Create by Fit for a King. Still a good album though. So number 10 is Deceivers by Arch Enemy. Definitely a very good album from Arch Enemy. I mean, I don't listen to Arch Enemy all the time, but they are one of my favorite melodic death metal bands out there. So Deceivers, good album. The singles from this album are great, and when I got to hear the album in full for the first time, I was pretty blown away. So yeah, Deceivers, definitely good. So if you're a fan of any kind of melodic death metal, then I would definitely check out this album, because it was a good album. So number 10, Deceivers by Arch Enemy. Number 9, The End So Far by Slipknot. Now, it sucks to have this album this low in the list, because their last album, We Are Not Your Kind, which was released in 2019, was actually my album of the year back then. But fast forward to 2022, they gave us this album, The End So Far, which I don't think it's a bad album per se, but could have been better, which is why I'm knocking it all the way down to number 9, because it just feels like some of these songs are just the same old Slipknot. You're not really getting anything different. I mean, they did try something different with one of these songs where they tried to make like a blues attempt, and I think it worked out really good. I think the song was called Acidic. That was a very different song for Slipknot because they made like blues metal or blues rock with that song, and it worked out really good. So this album could have been far better, but I think it's a good album. It is their last album with Roadrunner Records, so hopefully if this band releases newer albums in the future, hopefully they can reinvent themselves and make the kind of music that they want to make, and I just hope they make better albums. But however, The End So Far was still a solid release from Slipknot, but nowhere near as good as We Are Not Your Kind. So The End So Far comes in at number 9 for me. Number 8. Number 8 is Hotel California by Hollywood Undead. Now, this is a very interesting album because instead of just sticking with one style, Hollywood Undead, they tried different things. They done rap rock, new metal, EDM or electronic music or whatever genre they were trying to go with when it comes to the stuff outside of their normal style. But I think this was a very good album, and I wish I checked it out a lot sooner than I did. But however, it was a very good album from Hollywood Undead, and I would probably even go on to say that it's probably their best album since American Tragedy in 2011, which was actually my favorite Hollywood Undead album. But Hotel California, probably their best album since American Tragedy, in my opinion. So, this album was great, really enjoyed it. So, yeah, here it is at number 8. Still a good album, though. So, number 7 is Divisive by Disturbed. This was their first album since Evolution, which was released in 2018, which was definitely a decline for Disturbed because they try to be more mainstream and more radio friendly. I mean, I know this band is very mainstream, but I still love Disturbed. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. They got me into heavier music over a decade ago, and I appreciate that. But with Evolution, it was definitely a decline. But thankfully, with Divisive, they came back and gave us heavier music again. I mean, I don't think this was one of their best albums, but I still think Divisive is a good album. Definitely a huge improvement over Evolution. Anyone who heard Evolution would even agree with me on that, even if they're not the biggest fan of Disturbed. But me personally, I'm a big fan of this band, and I'm glad that they stepped it up with Divisive. Even though I don't think it's one of their best albums, I still think it's a good album. Title track, Divisive, was great. Unstoppable was good. And many other songs. So yeah, Divisive, definitely a good album. Like I said in the review, it's their shortest album, which was a complaint for me, but I still think it's a good album overall. So number 7, Divisive by Disturbed. Number 6 is Omens by Lamb of God. This album comes right after the self-titled album, which they released in 2020. Now, when it comes to this album versus the last album, I'd probably say that I liked maybe the self-titled album more. Not really sure. But however, Omens was definitely a good album. The title track was good. Nevermore was good. Ditch was a great song. Just to name a few. But this album is definitely worth checking out, though, if you're a fan of Lamb of God, because you can tell that they're still doing what they love to do. And that's definitely a great thing, because some metal bands, they sell out and all that and just decline. But with Omens, you will not be disappointed, because it's definitely Lamb of God, and you can tell it, because this band never changed their style or try to be a band that they're not with any of their other albums like most bands do. So yeah, Omens, no exception of disappointment at all. Definitely an amazing album. So despite where I'm putting it here, I like this album. It's one of my favorites of the year. Great album. So top 5 now, guys. We're in at number 5 now. So number 5 is Scoring the End of the World by Emotionless White. So yeah, Motionless in White doing great with this album. Skies from 2019 was a really good album. And I actually like that album more than Scoring the End of the World. However, Scoring the End of the World is still definitely a very good album. Sure, some songs were better than others, but that's kind of known with Motionless in White because sometimes they like to try different things with their music, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I don't think they're a bad band at all, though, because they're one of my favorite metalcore slash gothic metal bands. So yeah, Scoring the End of the World, definitely a good album. It's definitely worth checking out. Not as good as the last album, like I said, but still very good, though, and definitely worth giving a spin over and over again, because it's definitely a good album. So number 4 is Of Kingdom and Crown by Machine Head. Their last album, Catharsis, was very disappointing, which was one of the worst albums of 2018. Thankfully, reinvented themselves with Of Kingdom and Crown. I mean, I don't think this is their best album or anything, but I still think it's a good album, though. Probably their best since Bloodstone and Diamonds in 2014, I believe that album came out. Or maybe even Until the Locust or the Blackening. That's what I would say about this album. It's their best since one of those 3 albums. Because Catharsis was dog shit, for sure. But Kingdom and Crown shows that they still can make good music when they try to put in the effort, you know. So, yeah, this album was great. My Hands Are Empty was definitely a great single. I'm surprised that album even, I'm surprised that song even made the album, I meant to say, because it released, like, before the album was even announced, way before then. So, it's kind of a shocker when I learned the track listing and that song was gonna still make the album, because most musicians, when they want to release a new album, they'll release singles and all that, and these singles won't make the album. But thankfully with this song, it made the album, and I'm glad because it's definitely a good song. But yeah, this album overall was good. I mean, I know it was a long album, but it was still definitely worth checking out. So I'll be glad to come back to this album more and more in the future. Definitely a good album from Machine Head. Number 3, so we're in the top 3 now. So number 3 is Hate Uber Owls by Creator. No, I'm probably butchering that title, but I don't speak German, and I don't know and I don't know how to pronounce it. So, however the album is pronounced, it's a good album. Was it better than Gods of Violence? I would say so, or at least think it is. But I'll have to listen to this album more before I can even say that. But I still think Hate Uber Owls was a good album. So I'll definitely come back to it more and more because I do like Creator. They're one of my favorite thrash metal bands of all time, even outside of the big 4 here in the United States. But yeah, Hate Uber Owls, or Hate Uber Owls, however you pronounce it, it was a good album. So it comes in at number 3 for me. Number 2 is Digital Noise Alliance by Queensryche. Holy fuck. This album is amazing. Definitely had to be in my top 3. I love Queensryche. Their music really never disappoints me. I mean, sure, some of their later albums with Jeff Tate when he was still in the band were shit, but thankfully when Todd Latour joined as their permanent vocalist in 2013, thankfully they got to reinvent themselves and actually sound like Queensryche. Because when Jeff was still in the band in the late 90s and 2000s, he ended up getting fired from the band because of the bullshit he was doing to other members. Their albums weren't very good to that point, but when he came in the band, Todd Latour, they reinvented themselves and started making great music again, and this album is amazing. I'd probably say it's probably their best since Empire, in my opinion. But yeah, man, this album was great. I even think it was better than The Verdict, and The Verdict was one of the best albums of 2019, but Digital Noise Alliance is amazing. I love this album, and it makes me extremely proud to be a fan of this band, because This album was great. What is there really else to say when an album is this good? So Digital Noise Alliance, congrats on making my top 2, because this album is fucking flawless from finish to end. So number 1 is The Sick, The Dying and the Dead by Megadeth. This is no surprise to me that it's my number 1 album of the year, because I was looking forward to this album for many years, just like everybody else was. Yes, there's some controversy surrounding this album, because David Ellefson was fired from the band before the album's release, like some point last year, or whenever that whole scenario happened, because David Ellefson was in the news where he was grooming apparently someone underage, but I don't know much about the story, but it's fucked up. So Megadeth and Dave Mustaine were pretty much in the right to kick him out of the band for that. But yeah, this album was great. Title track was good. I really enjoyed We'll Be Back. That was a great lead single. Killing Time was a great song. Still my favorite on the album. So yeah, man, this is Megadeth. They don't make bad music at all. I mean, they may have like 2 albums that don't do much for everybody, those being Risk from 1999 and Super Collider in 2013. But other than that, though, this band makes great music still, even in the 2020s decade, and that's great because most thrash metal bands, they don't really do that, especially when they've been doing it for over 30 years. But yeah, man, I'm glad this album is my favorite of the year. It's amazing. I mean, I don't know if I like it better than Dystopia from 2016, but I still think it's a very good album, though. And I'm still gonna stand by my word that it is the album of the year. So, this is my list, guys. Let me know y'all's favorite albums and all that from 2022. Sorry if I made any errors throughout this video. I'm just on a limited time because I really want this video out today to end off the calendar year, because tomorrow is 2023. So yeah, guys, I'll see y'all next time. Happy New Year's, guys. Appreciate y'all very much, and I'll see y'all in the new year. Peace.